Hello and welcome everyone. It is 11:30 Central, so we will get started. Thank you for tuning in to today's webinar, Child Development Associate Prep Kit for Certification Readiness. My name is Emily. I am on the marketing team here at Realityworks. I will be behind the scenes assisting our lead presenter today, Denise DuBois. Denise is one of our product managers here at Realityworks and has been with us for a little over 10 years. She is a frequent presenter, trainer, and blogger for all things related to RealCare Baby and other related products. She has over 20 years of education, marketing, product design, and curriculum writing experience, so she is a fantastic resource for today's webinar. Before we get started, I do want to cover a couple things. First, today's presentation is being recorded and all attendees will receive a link to the recording as well as a copy of the PowerPoint slides that will include the scenarios that Denise will go over today. You should see that in your email within 24 hours after the webinar. We will have time for a question and answer at the end of the session. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A feature at the bottom or the chat, and we will answer as many questions at the end. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and pass things over to Denise to get us going.
Thank you, Emily, and welcome everyone. Now, if you're looking for some new resources to help your students prepare for the CDA certification test, well, then this webinar we hope is for you. I'm going to highlight a brand new resource for preparing students for this industry recognized certification. Now, this scenario-based approach challenges students to problem solve and work through infant, toddler, and preschool level real-life scenarios involving childcare skills. So here's just a look at what we're going to be covering in our webinar today. We're going to share some information about the CDA if you're not familiar, and talk a little bit about how this kit can help prepare your students for that. We will be sharing some sample scenarios from our infant, toddler, and preschool levels in the kit. And then you're going to come away with ideas for using this to infuse childcare pathway programs with some real world scenarios. So first of all, here's a review of just what the CDA is. The High School Child Development Associate credential jumpstarts successful careers. Now, if you're a student interested in working with early childhood education, earning a CDA can help you get a job in the field by the time you leave high school and can help you earn college credit towards your degree. The CDA credential itself is based on the knowledge of the nation's leading scholars in early childhood education and learning. Now, it's the only portable, national, and multi-language credential of its kind. So the CDA can open career opportunities for thousands of graduates every year. Now, while there are 4 different certifications through the CDA, our kit specifically is going to help students prepare for both of those center-based certifications. We've got the center-based infant toddler and the center-based preschool certifications. So here are the steps for getting a CDA certificate in high school. Now, the number is growing each year as the desire for industry recognized credentials continues to grow. So our new kit that we're going to be highlighting today can help you in step 1. That is, it can be used as a resource in that CTE classroom to help teach the content and prepare your students. So for those of you who may not be as familiar, there are 13 standards that students must master for the infant, toddler, and the preschool certification tests. Now, we have real-world scenarios that cover each of these 13 standards areas in this program, and we'll show you how that works in just a moment. So how can we help? Well, this program is going to challenge your students to problem solve issues and day-to-day situations that will happen every day on the job. So these were written by a child care center director who has been a teacher and longtime center director. So she knows the types of real world scenarios that those infant, toddler, and preschool teachers are going to run into. So this will really help your students use those critical thinking skills. So the kit includes 3 scenarios for each of those 13 standards areas. So it gives your students a wealth of opportunities to apply their skills in each of those 13 areas. So in the program, there will be a total of 39 infant toddler scenarios and 39 preschool scenarios. So there are 3 scenarios per competency that will give your students plenty of practice. So just what comes in the kit? Well, we've included the following. First of all, you get a teacher guide, and in that there's a sample lesson which tells you how to use all of the parts and pieces of the program to do a lesson with students. There are also 10 sets of the infant toddler scenario cards, and the card decks are made up of, again, those 13 competencies, and there's 3 scenarios for each of those. So it's 13 cards in each deck. So we have 10 sets of those. We have 10 sets of those preschool scenario cards. We have a set of 20 workbooks for the infant toddler. And then we also have another set of workbooks, 20 for the preschool. So we included the 10 sets of the cards because we wanted there to be enough of those so students could pair up for discussions and small group things like that. If you happen to be teaching in a live or hybrid model right now. And we'll also give you some tips for if you're working in a remote learning environment, how you could also adapt some of the content for that environment as well. So those are all the parts and pieces that come with the prep kit. So here is what a typical scenario card includes. First of all, you will see at the top of the card, it will say whether it's with the infant toddler deck or the preschool deck. So you know what level. It will identify the competency standard, the functional area, and then it will include the scenario. And then underneath the scenario, there will also always be several key questions. Now, these could be used for discussion. They can be turned into writing activities, but there's key questions that students need to think through, and they could discuss with each other if you're pairing them up, that have to do with solving that scenario. And then on the back of the card are some potential solutions for the scenario as well. Now, here is a sample workbook page. In the workbook, there is a writing activity that includes answering all of the key questions for each of those 39 scenarios. But then there's also one additional activity that accompanies each scenario as well for more application of student skills. So that extra activity extends the application further for each of those functional areas. So, you know, we've said there's 39 scenarios in each of those different levels. So in the workbook, that means there's also 39 different pages where they have to answer those key questions in writing, but then there's also 39 extension activity pages as well. So there's 78 pages in each of those workbooks. So it gives students a lot of practice applying and problem solving and thinking through all the different scenarios in each of the functional areas. So how to use it in your program? Well, there's a lot of different ways you can use it. It's very flexible and very customizable. So I'm going to give you some different ideas for ways that it could be used. First of all, you could begin your class with a 5-minute challenge by choosing a card from one of the developmental stages and functional areas that you want to focus on for that class. You could read it to the class, you could show it on a document projector. Students could also be paired up and looking at it on the card. If you're in a remote learning environment, you could also scan it as a PDF and share it in your LMS system. But give your students access to a scenario that you choose. You could have your students work in small groups to discuss it and answer those key questions. They could do it independently if you wish. If you happen to be in person, you know, if you split everybody out into small groups, they could bring their class back together after they've had a chance to discuss, and you could share the answers to those key questions. Now, we know the possible solutions to the scenario can be found on the other side of the card. But those are just a few of the potential solutions. We know that student answers will vary. So you could share those, but also invite some of the groups or some of the students to share some of the solutions that they have come up with. Now, for variation, you could introduce an infant toddler scenario, and then you could also take a preschool scenario from the same functional area and give students one scenario from each level, and again, put them through either pairing them up or doing it independently like that. But you could choose to kick off a lesson on one of those competency areas by just choosing one of the scenarios or one of the scenarios in both of the levels as a way to kick it off and introduce them to that area. Now, another thing you could do, of course, is you could think, pair, share. So have your students pair up, you know, give them the scenario cards for that stage in the area you'd like to focus on. You could give your students all 3 of them for each of the levels if you chose, or maybe just one. You can decide how much time you have. You can have each pair lay the card or cards on the table or surface in front of them, read and discuss, but tell them not to turn the card over. They should be tasked with coming up with at least 2 solutions during their discussion first before they flip the scenario card over to see those possible solutions. And again, you could discuss as a class, having each pair share one of the solutions that they came up with. Now, if you want to integrate use of that workbook, first of all, you could identify which of the developmental levels, whether it be infant, toddler, or preschool or both, and which of those functional areas you want to focus on. You could give your students the appropriate workbooks, so they all have their own, and then tell them which of those scenarios that you want to focus on, and you could either have them give them the cards, or they could go right to those pages in the student workbook. And then you could teach the content that you wish that would provide a lot of that background information on that functional area, which would be the lesson focus. We know that teachers choose, and teach content from many areas. So you may have a textbook you're already using or other sources, but this is a great way to augment that and get them discussing, engaged, and really problem solving in that functional area. Now, if your students are in a remote or even a hybrid model, you could give them the workbooks to take home with them. They can have those. And then in order to turn in the assignments, they would probably have to either take a picture, or they would just need to answer the questions and that additional activity in the workbook in just a Word doc that they would turn into you. But there are definitely ways that you can adapt this to a remote learning format, or you simply allow them to have the workbook and they take a picture and they send it to you as a way to see the work that they're doing. Now, each of the workbooks, again, does include the 3 scenarios for each level. And each scenario, again, has those key questions. So we're also including writing activities. And there's that additional scenario or exercise as well. So you've got 39 scenarios in that workbook, plus 39 extension activities that go with each of the scenarios. So we usually say each scenario and the accompanying exercise may take anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour to complete. It depends on the level of the student and their and what they're able to do. But for planning purposes, one way you could use this is spend 1 week on each of those 13 functional areas by assigning all of the related scenarios and exercises during that week. So you let's say your functional area is let's see here. Maybe your functional area is safe. So your competency standard is to establish and maintain a safe, healthy learning environment. So your functional area is safe. So all of the 3 scenarios for infant toddler will be around the idea of safety. And your preschool, you also have 3 scenarios that have to do with infant safety. And then, of course, that's a total of 6 scenarios that they read through. They've got those key questions, and then you've got those 6 extension activities as well for that functional area. So it gives them a lot of application in the different areas for that same functional area. Another way that you can use some of the assets in the program, like the scenario cards, is as an assessment at the end of the lesson. You may wish to keep one card or one scenario card from each level, the infant, toddler, and the preschool level, as the assessment. So you maybe assign everything else for students to do during that week, but you hold back that one card, that one scenario, and that becomes the assessment. You can then see how students are applying the information and the problem solving strategies and things that they've learned about that functional area during that week. And then that scenario becomes your assessment tool. So there's a lot of different ways that you can use the cards as well as the workbooks and the activities that are found in the workbooks. We even have some instructors that are planning to they're going to choose one of those scenario cards for each functional area to be like a pre and a post assessment. So they give that to the student at the beginning of the week, see what they know, see how they answer that and solve that scenario on day 1 before they've learned the content. You teach the lesson, the students work through all of the other scenarios and activities, but then at the end of the week, they come back to that original scenario and they answer that again. And you can see if they've changed over the course of the week and what they've learned and how they would therefore solve that scenario. So here is a sample scenario card and one of the workbook extension activities for an infant scenario. So you can see it identifies the standard, it identifies the functional area, and then it gives you the scenario. And the scenarios are not super long, but so students will read through the scenario. You come back from your lunch break and notice the new floater that was subbing for your break has covered a 4-month-old baby with a blanket from his cubby. He also has a pacifier with a clip in his mouth. So you can see there's the 3 key questions students can answer. There are some potential solutions on the other side of the card, but if you wanted to, you could direct students to go right to the workbook and do those and answer those key questions in writing. And then the extension activity for this particular one is, imagine you have a new family starting in your infant classroom. Make a list of potential items that they may need to bring with them. So your students, again, would complete that as well. So that's a sample from the infant scenario card. Oops. Here is a sample from our toddler scenario and the activity that goes with that. So in this particular one, our competency standard has to do with advancing physical and intellectual competence. The functional area is physical. So all of our problem solving scenarios for this will have to do with the physical environment or something physical with the toddler. So during mealtime, you notice a 22-month-old infant in your classroom is having difficulty picking up pieces of food with his fingers. Instead, he usually uses his whole fist. So you've got the 3 key questions that deal with fine motor skills and things like that. And then the extension activity in the workbook for this one has students thinking about designing 2 to 3 fine motor activities for children in a toddler classroom. And so they think that up and they complete the activity here. Again, on the other side of this card, you've also got some potential solutions. So one of them might be explain to the floater that blankets, pacifier clips and other loose fitting articles are not permitted in an infant crib, and so on. Now we're going to share a preschool scenario. So here's a sample scenario and activity at the preschool level. Again, we've identified our standard, and then our functional area here is creative. So our scenario is, you would like to enhance and extend the musical experiences of the children in your class, but you don't know much about music or how to play an instrument. So your students could think through those key questions. They could share some of those potential solutions, or you could do that as a large group. And they also do those as a writing activity. And then you could also have them complete the extension activity in the workbook as well, which is researching a type of music that they know nothing about, finding some songs that would be appropriate for use in the classroom, and so forth. So those are the types of scenarios and activities. We really are trying to make this very useful so that students get so much practice with problem solving and things that when they come to the certification test, that this they feel like they've done this before and they feel very prepared. So here are some of the benefits to your students for doing a program like this. First of all, we have integrated soft skills throughout the program as well. So not only are they problem solving, but if they're working in pairs, they are communicating, they're doing teamwork. Problem solving goes hand in hand with critical thinking and more. So soft skills are embedded in this as well. We think that students will feel much more confident if they've gone through weeks and 78 scenarios is a lot of problem solving to do, and they should feel very prepared to walk in and take that test. Now, even if the CDA is not offered in your program or in your school, we feel that there is benefit to students, because if they are interested in going into a childcare career of some sort with young children, especially if it's in a childcare setting, these are things that they're scenarios they are going to be encountering every single day. So whether they go for that CDA certification or not, this is useful information and certainly worth putting them through to think through and be able to solve, because in real life, they're going to have to do that. That's an area that they would like to go into. And when they get done with all of their work in the scenarios, it's a great supplemental resource that they can keep with them, especially those workbooks, because they're their own. They can keep them and they can refer to them in the future. And it's just really a nice take-home resource for them to have. But the program just in general also is a great supplemental kit, because it works well with anything you're already using. If you've got a textbook or some of your own resources that you've put together to teach some of this content, That's great. It's not replacing what you're doing, but it gives you some variety and some additional things that you can do with your students, especially if you find yourself in a hybrid or a remote environment. Scenario-based learning works great for adapting to that environment, because you can put a lot of these different scenarios out there on your LMS system, and students can do a lot of this independently. You can even put some of those key questions out there in a discussion forum if you've got that in your LMS system. So as creative as you want to be, a lot of the things or parts and pieces to this program certainly could be used in a remote environment. We know there's a lot of uncertainty this year, so we're trying to be as flexible as we can. So if you're really interested in learning more about the CDA Prep Kit, this is the link to our website. It will give you more information about the contents and cost and how to order and things like that. You can order it right from our store, but that is the link that you would go to. Realityworks.com is really the main thing you need to know there if you'd like to learn more. And then if some of you are just curious about some of the pricing, the CDA Prep Kit itself, the larger kit contains 10 sets of those infant toddler cards, 10 sets of those preschool cards, and then 20 of the workbooks at the infant and toddler and the preschool levels. And then you get that instructor guide that has the lesson outline that gives you tips and best practices for how you would lay out a lesson using all the different parts and pieces. And then you can actually purchase more decks of the cards if you wish to have more of the card decks for either of the levels. And of course, as you work through the workbooks and need replenishment of those are available on our website as well. So that's kind of the overview of our CDA Prep Kit. Now we've got a couple other products that we just wanted to point out that go really nicely with that. That are new for childcare careers. And here's one that's called our Childcare Center Design Kit. And it's a hands-on design experience for students where they're tasked with designing 3 different rooms in a childcare center. Students learn best practices for laying out the space in an infant room, a toddler room, and a preschool room for optimal learning and student interaction. So this kit includes a curriculum written by an experienced FACS instructor with a strong childcare program. Now, this includes the scaled tiles that represent furniture found in childcare centers. So students design their space on a dry erase board, designing the layout of the ideal childcare space for each age group. And the kit includes enough pieces for 5 small groups or 5 individuals to work with the kit simultaneously. The kit also comes with things like dry erase markers and microfiber cloths, so they can draw additional room details, such as learning centers in their space as well. So this could be a terrific remote resource as well if you wanted to send home one of these trays with 5 of your students as a fun activity to do as well. So that's just one of our newer things for childcare. And then another thing we have is what we call our pathway specific scenario card decks. And this really focuses specifically on soft skills. And we have 19 different soft skills that are represented in each of in the scenario card deck here. So things like teamwork, respect, responsibility, time management. There's one scenario that focuses on each of the soft skills, and they're all surrounding childcare careers. So that would be, again, a scenario that would be very realistic. And then again, students are tasked with answering questions and considering other points of views. These make great large group discussion things. You could do, again, a 5-minute icebreaker at the beginning of class or an assessment at the end of class. But this is a really easy way to infuse and teach many different soft skills in your childcare career pathway program as well. This also does have a workbook that you can order as well in packages of 20. And each of those scenarios, you have those key questions in there as a written activity, as well as additional extension activities that go with each scenario. So if you're wanting to extend what you're doing for childcare careers to include more specifically on soft skills, this is just a really nice and easy way to be able to do that. So again, there are 19 soft skills included in that. So Q&A time. I've thrown a lot of information at you, so we'd really like to give you the opportunity to ask any questions you might have about any of the content that we've covered today. And Emily, I know you've been monitoring the chat room, so if you've got any questions, I'd be happy to take those.
I'm not seeing any questions come through right now. Oh,
All
one
right.
question that just came in is
Yeah.
how is this best used in an online format?
In an online format, what you could do is give all of your students the workbooks. So whether they come pick those up or you send them out, and then you could scan in all of the cards as a PDF, and then you would simply put the scenario out on your LMS system. You can email it to students. You can share it as a document, but they could then get at the contents found on the card, and you could also task them with completing the appropriate workbook pages that go with each of the cards.
Perfect. And then another question that came in, Denise, was how do I get my program certified?
If you are interested in going after that certification, the CDA, the Child Development Associate, there's a council that is the keeper or the genesis of the CDA certification, and they've got a website with tons of resources. And I know that they would be able to point you in the right direction of just what to do to start a certification, especially if you're at the high school level. We don't deal with the actual certification part of it. This is meant as a tool to help prepare your students and hopefully make them have a better chance at passing the certification and being comfortable doing so.
Awesome. And then another question that came in is for the initial order, can you order the workbooks separately? And if so, how much do those cost?
Yes, you can. You can order sets of workbooks. They're 20 for $2.99. They are on our website store at the link that I shared earlier. And if you've been participating in the webinar, you will receive a copy of the PowerPoint, which of course will have that link in it. But you can find all this at realityworks.com. And if you just do a keyword of CDA, that the product information will come up.
And then also with the workbooks, do we have them digital version of them?
No, we don't. We have this in print format only.
Okay, and then just a question on how they would go about grading it if the students weren't able to turn in the documents
Yeah.
with the workbook.
Yeah, if you're in a remote setting and they've got the workbook at home, they'd have to do one of two things. They could complete the workbook page, and they could take a photo of it and send it to you like that. It's not great, but it's one way to do it. Another way you could do it is you'll notice in most of the extension activities and the key questions and things like that, if students had to, they could just in a Word doc just retype the question or just answer and complete the extension activity. Most of it would work just fine in a Word doc. And if they had to do that and send it to you via email or whatever, that's another way that it could be done.
Perfect. And then are there any artifacts produced through using the prep kit that the kids could use for a CDA portfolio?
Well, simply by having each student have their own workbook for the infant, toddler, and the preschool level, if you have them complete all of the activities in there, that becomes their portfolio in effect. In fact, we have some students that are using these for also graduation portfolio artifacts. It shows that they've gone through, doing this whole program. They've answered 78 different scenarios and things like that. So it shows a lot of application of their knowledge.
Perfect. And then in the CDA prep kit, are there lesson plans for high school teachers?
In the instructor guide, we have laid out what a kind of a sample lesson, if you will, and how you could use all the different parts in a lesson, and it can certainly be used at a high school level.
Awesome. And then we do have a question regarding one of our videos. Denise, are you the voice in the Real Care Baby student video?
Yes, yes, I am. Maybe listening to myself. So
You're getting recognized now.
I guess.
I'm not seeing any other comments come through. I do see that somebody did put the CDA Council information in there, so I will include that to all attendees so they can have that as well. So I just sent that to everybody.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, they've got a ton of information on their website and are very, very helpful. All right. Well, thank you everybody for participating in our webinar today. We hope you found it helpful, and we hope we've given you some information so that maybe you'll have another new tool for your toolkit as you teach childcare career skills. Thank you very much.